Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us today on this week's episode of Dual Essence, where we talk about all things mental health. We're your host, Miguel,
And I'm Andrea.
and as mental health nurse practitioners, we're here to raise awareness and provide you with practical skills for managing different mental health related topics. So, today we'll be discussing the topic of trauma and the different ways our body reacts to real and perceived stress.
And many of you might have heard of the fight or flight response. But today we're going to talk about two additional ones, which are called fawn and freeze. And together, these four make up the four F's of what we call overactive stress responses. We're going to be talking about how our current situation, whatever difficulties we're facing in life, they're not the only reason why we may be reacting to a certain situation in the way that we do with one of these four F's. Our childhood experiences also mold the way that we respond as an adult. And so the childhood reactions that we have may have helped us survive during the times when we were facing traumatic events. But now, as an adult, they could be affecting how we relate to others. They can affect our relationships and just overall general potential as a human. But before we dive into this episode, let's first get grounded. And if you want to skip today's grounding technique, just fast forward to minute 6:55. The technique for today is a guided meditation that you can come back to when you're feeling stressed or unsafe. So, first, close your eyes and let's start by taking a few deep breaths. Inhale through your nose and exhale. Inhale and exhale. As you continue breathing, feel the tension begin to leave your body as you continue to take slow and calming breaths. Now mentally scan your body and take note of how your body feels in this very moment. Focus in on the areas that feel tense or uncomfortable and really focus on relaxing those areas. Feel your body becoming more relaxed, slowly releasing more tension, letting go of stress as you relax your body. Now visualize a protective light. Imagine this light is shining all around you as if you are glowing. And this light keeps you safe right now from stress, from tension, worries, or other problems that seem to bother you. So picture in your mind being surrounded by this light. It may be warm, it may be cool, but you can see it glow. And feel how calm and secure you feel as you're protected by this light that surrounds you. This light is like a shield, deflecting anything that is not good, protecting you and helping you feel completely at ease. Now turn your attention to your feet. Notice how your feet are surrounded by this light, and they grow more and more relaxed as the light climbs upward towards your ankles and your legs. Feel the light helping your legs relax. They become soft and heavy, perhaps. Now your upper legs are surrounded by the light. Allow this light to support you, to support your legs, and the much needed rest that they need from keeping you on your feet every day, keeping you grounded. Now focus on your hands. As the light climbs up and through your arms and shoulders and neck, feel the tension leave your hands, your arms, your shoulders, and your neck. Now feel the light circle back forward and into your core, relaxing your stomach, your back, your chest, your hips, illuminating you from the inside out. Allow the calming sensation to work up towards your head. Feel your face relaxing, letting go of tension, and the light glowing warmly on your face and your whole body. This light is shielding you right now from worries, troubles. And notice there still might be some areas of tension somewhere in your body, some worries that remain in your mind. You can even picture these as dark tensions. Now envision the dark tension is being drawn out by this protective light. Feel how those worries and that stress is leaving your body as the protective light draws them out of your body and away from you. The light also works as a magnet for good and peaceful thoughts, attracting harmony to you. Feel the protective light drawing tension out and bringing inward relaxation. So enjoy this feeling of being safe and protected by your shield of this protective light. You are calm, peaceful, and safe. And remember, you can come back to this protective light at any time that you need to do so throughout your day. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. And when you're ready, open your eyes again.
All right, welcome back, guys. As we mentioned before, our topic today is trauma and the stress response. Most of us, whether you went to nursing school or didn't, have heard of the fight or flight response. You know, it's either you're cornered in, so you're going to fight with someone because that's your only way to get out, or you have a chance to escape, so you run away to save yourself, right? So very well understood in society, a fight or flight response. We hear it a lot. But the other two of the four Fs that aren't really spoken about is freeze and fawn. So these four combined are what we know as the four Fs: the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So overall stress responses are normal, right? It's healthy for our body to have that stress because that's what helps us in many different ways. So our brain and the automatic nervous system, they react. Cortisol and adrenaline are the two hormones that are released, which they trigger physical changes to prepare you for the threat, right? Whether it's physical or an emotional threat. Children that grow up in healthy households, they develop to become adults that have all those needs met. So they develop healthy and flexible responses. So they understand how to appropriately use all four depending on the situation. So when they use all four, they are in a situation they can ensure that they create healthy boundaries and also healthy assertiveness, right? Let me go through the examples of four Fs. Fight, very well understood. You're in a situation where you start arguing with a colleague because they are disrespecting you. So you feel like you need to stand up for yourself. So that's, a healthy thing you got to do to have those boundaries. Flight, you jump out of the way of a car that's about to hit you. I mean, that's something reactive and it's going to save your life. So freeze is a situation that maybe you walk into your house and you hear a weird noise. So you freeze up because you're like, okay, let me see what's about to happen or what's going on. So for fawn, we can think of a situation where your spouse in the past maybe hasn't argued about a certain topic and you kind of resemble the same reaction of like, let me stay quiet about something they're doing now because I don't want to be in that situation of having to argue.
So it's like biting your tongue, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, biting your tongue for fawn.
But in some, there may be an overactive stress response due to childhood trauma. Things that most people wouldn't necessarily find threatening, like, for example, getting a flat tire or someone canceling their plans with you. That, for the most part, isn't considered a threat to most people, right? But for someone that has an overactive stress response, regardless of which one they associate with the most, they consider that a threat psychologically, emotionally, and they just may respond in kind of not an exaggerated way, but a very defensive way using one of these four stress responses. And this is pretty frequent in people that have had significant trauma, like in PTSD or complex PTSD, which is something we'll talk about later in this episode. But honestly, attachment theory, here comes again, it plays a major role in which stress reaction is formed. The bond with our parent really influences how we relate to other people. And so if our parents take care of our needs, emotional support and literally physical and safety needs, we grow up with like confidence, right? To trust people, we can build healthy relationships, we have confidence to deal with challenges and threats in a more healthy way, right? But if there was abuse, if there was neglect or trauma in childhood, then, it might be hard for us to use a healthy version of these responses in an effective way. And then we become stuck in maybe one or two of these four F's, and they typically favor the response that got you what you needed as a child to either help you escape the trauma, to hide from the trauma, to prevent more trauma, like whatever response that helped you survive in that sense. That's kind of the one we tend to get stuck in when we're in this overactive stress response.
Yeah, and I think we can both say we've seen that in right now being in nursing school and the clinicals, like when we're, with our patients and we're talking to them, like childhood trauma just gets carried on. And like people just, you get a 40-year-old, they're telling you about their childhood trauma and so much of their current situation with stress and how they're not managing it well and everything has to do when they were 5 or 6 years old. Like it's incredible how it's very common in people that, we find ways to hide the trauma because we are not taught about going to therapy and maybe getting medications that's appropriate, but where they're learning in clinicals with patients and you got a 40-50-year-old male who had all this trauma and they just haven't addressed it and now their life is very stressful and now they have to it all comes out.
Oh, for sure. And I see it too, even in the clients that I do see through therapy. It's unfortunate to see how much of the struggles that they face in adulthood stem from reactions that they had, as a child, whether their needs were met or not, the responses that they had. And so this is definitely an important topic to either kind of, if we start recognizing this in a child, like addressing it, like teaching the family to address it, teaching coping strategies so that we can improve the environment for the child because it's important. And there are obviously multiple factors that influence your response. The type of trauma, the pattern of neglect and abuse. Sometimes even we don't really think about this, but the birth order, we think this is like pseudoscience, but there is something about the relationship of how someone is born, if they're the oldest, if they're stuck in the middle, if they're the youngest. So that influences a lot the role in the family dynamics.
Well, I know about the birth order because you were middle child, so I've had those situations of like you feel left out because maybe I didn't do the certain thing, but because you're the middle child, so
That's true. That definitely affects me. And then also personality traits. That has a lot to do too, because it's not just, what's your birth order, what role did you play in your family, but also what personality traits do you have? Are they going to make you more susceptible to having an overactive stress response, or do you naturally just have more resilience and you're able to learn more effective ways, on your own essentially, or, being more open to therapy early on?
now let's talk a little bit about the four F's. So for fight, it's kind of, that unconscious belief that power and control will equal acceptance and love. This could be an issue with someone if they didn't have safety as a child, especially if they had parents that, didn't have healthy limits with them, spoiled them, shamed them, or, demonstrated narcissistic rage, whether bullying or disgust. And as adults, then with them growing up like that, it shows up as actual physical or verbal aggression. But also, it can show up as publicly embarrassing someone that harmed them emotionally, or giving someone silent treatment for a couple days or weeks because maybe that person did something that to them was a big deal, like overcooking their food to their preference, or just anything that to them it's a big deal. They feel that they have to act this way. Now, for flight, it's really that unconscious belief that perfection achievement will make them be safe and lovable, right? So they're trying to flee from pain of by escaping and denying emotional distress. So this shows up in people that as children, maybe tended to stay over at friends or family's house to avoid going home, or focus completely on school with that straight A student because they were trying to avoid something else, right? And now as adults, it comes up as a perfection tendencies in all parts of their life. So they really struggle with everything has to be perfect and they avoid any kind of conflict or emotional pain. Maybe they're the people that ghost someone, right? They're just not gonna, they don't want to deal with conflict. So they use work or hobbies or sometimes substances to fend off that fear, anxiety, or pain that they're feeling.
And now for freeze, there's an unconscious belief that people equal danger. And that can show up in people that were considered like the scapegoat of the family, the one that all the family members tended to like pick on or devalue in a sense, the most profoundly abandoned or neglected child. And now as an adult, it can show up as dissociating, to just feel mentally disconnected from a situation that's causing them psychological or emotional pain. Sometimes it can even result in like physically passing out, like just from being so stressed in a sense and so overwhelmed with the situation that they literally pass out to not experience the distress. And it can also be just using fantasy or imagination to escape day-to-day stress. And this is like overuse of fantasy and imagination, and just preferring to be alone, and even in some cases avoiding relationships altogether. And then fawn, there's an unconscious belief that to escape harm, you have to please the other person that's threatening you and make them happy. Keep them satisfied so that there's nothing that can go wrong, and therefore you're not affected emotionally or psychologically. And this can show up in people that ignored their own needs to take care of a parent, or they just failed to develop, a real strong sense of identity, or they had to give up personal boundaries to really help minimize abuse and kind of go into that survival mode. And now as adults, it can come up as the yes man, or, the people pleasers that they tend to really overlook themselves to appease other people's needs. They may avoid sharing thoughts or feelings in a relationship out of fear of making people angry. And they can, develop codependency on close relationships.
Yeah, now that we're talking about this, I can really relate to the fight because my previous career in finance, it was always about like we're in Wall Street. It was, sales environment, so everybody had a you eat what you kill kind of mentality. So it was like, and I mean, I remember a situation where I was a loan officer and I was working with the realtor, and then this realtor is like, oh, this person said this about you that I shouldn't work with you. And I'm like, that person that they were talking about was someone that I was friends with, but now we're both in the same field, in the same role. So they felt like, oh, let me put them down by, it's either for me or for them, like, the sale or whatever. So to them, they felt that they had a fight in that situation. And it really threw me off because I'm like, okay, but there's enough for everybody. But, it was a situation that it just made me feel, not so good.
Yeah, that sounds just like what I would imagine Wall Street kind of mentalities might be, and definitely if stress responses are overactive, I can see how fight might be the more common one in that sense. Flight, I think, would be the one that I tend to identify the most with. Definitely have those tendencies to avoid difficult situations just to not experience the distress. But really, it's important to recognize that, like, even if there's one that you might identify, it may not be exactly one whole category. You may have a combo, a hybrid of like two or three, sometimes in some cases. And really, the more common combos are the fight and flight kind of together, which I definitely identify with, and then the flight and fight tends to be another combo. But there are also specific interventions that someone can do according to like which one that they have. And so, for example, the flight one, which is, like I said, the one that I sometimes tend to overuse, an important intervention is to try to really get some introspection about what are the things that hurt you perhaps in your childhood that you may be trying to escape from. Like, what are the emotions that you've experienced that aren't pleasant, but unfortunately you have to experience to be able to process and get better responses to now your everyday stressors in life. And for freeze, which is another one that I might sometimes tend to use or overuse, it's important to establish a therapeutic relationship and to really identify relational healing through friends, maybe through your pets, through reading or through support groups, because the key there is to really understand the cost of isolation and how that impacts you. And so back to flight, because I think it's important to mention, it's important to understand the cost of perfectionism and how that could be causing self-abandonment. And then for fight, it's important to initiate timeouts when you're feeling really stressed, and you're about to engage in that overactive response, and try to adapt to using one of the other four F's, especially like Fawn's empathy. Fawns can the people that tend to use the Fawn's response, they're very empathic. They are very aware of what the other person's needs are. So maybe when you're in the fight, overactive stress response, try to tap into some of Fawn's empathy to help you react better to a situation. Because there, it's really important to understand the cost of power and how that really causes abandonment, because people are afraid eventually to become intimate with you. And then for fun, it's important to practice self expression, to gain authenticity, and to really reduce the habit of emotional mood mirroring. So when you see someone else is experiencing something that's going to affect you, you don't have to mirror that necessarily and create that emotional boundary at that point. And definitely learn to accept disapproval and really practice being more assertive. Because the key there is to understand that forfeiting your boundaries, your rights, and your needs is going to come at a cost and it's going to affect you and the way you develop and function now, as an adult.
Yeah, and I think those are all great examples. If someone can identify with one, like I said, I identify with the fight as kind of the one that I have some kind of issues with or have had in the past. So, but I think
You're definitely a fighter. I'm just kidding.
but I think if we really look at, society, there's some people that have had really traumatic childhoods, trauma that is really hard to process on your own. So that's where really therapy is key to really help that person process and heal from those early childhood traumas that could be causing that overreactive stress response. So what is therapy going to help that person? What's going to help them with the ability to challenge those fixed responses that they've had since they were a child and now are still having issues with as an adult. It's also going to help them to learn how to be more effective with using healthier combinations or healthier responses to whatever stressor is in their life now that they've been reacting that same way since they were a child. Another one is really just the process of healing because whatever trauma someone went through, like they need that process of healing to be able to move forward. As well as it's going to help someone create healthy boundaries because you need healthy boundaries to be able to live a good life and not have your body always in stress mode. Therapy is going to help them reconnect with themselves because many times patients talk about how they lost themselves after that trauma. They felt like they don't know who they are since then. And they've been kind of just living through life of what other people expected and stuff. So,
So, on that note, it's really important to try and gain some perspective on what your stress response is to really understand how to tackle it, how to improve, how to develop a more effective and more healthier way to respond to things in life. And so, we do have a quiz on our site under the podcast tab under resources. You guys can find a short little quiz to kind of try and give you some insight on which one or which ones you might identify the most with and use that to kind of do some digging and do some research on like how to really get this overreactive stress response more under control, either you on your own through some self-help kind of guides, or using a therapist because it's definitely helpful to have someone guide you through your healing journey and your experience. I know, like you said, like trauma, it's difficult. You're not going to just magically make it go away, your experiences that are causing the triggers and causing your overactive responses, but one step at a time, one session at a time, little by little, it gets better and better, and you develop healthier coping mechanisms and healthier stress responses, essentially. But definitely, guys, check out the resources. We have them on our site at joinadolescents.com, like I said, under the podcast tab, or just feel free to follow the link in the description of this episode to just get you there quickly. To try and help you identify what type or types of stress response you use the most, and like I said, ways to help improve them.
yeah, we hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. And it's important to note that, we talked today may or may not relate to you or your circumstance. You're the only person that can really decide what is the best approach to your mental well being. So we encourage you to reflect on this topic some more, practice being self aware, and seek professional help when appropriate for your circumstance.
Well, everyone, that wraps up today's episode about the 4Fs and our overactive stress responses.
But before we go, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you can review new episodes right when they're released. You can either subscribe right now in the app you're listening to this podcast, or you can sign up for email alerts at joinadolescents.com. And we also love to hear your thoughts about today's episode or any episodes in the past. Please leave a comment or send us a DM on what really stuck out with you today or what we missed about this important topic.
So, thank you again for joining us on this episode of Dual Essence. Next week, we're going to be talking about self esteem. What exactly does it mean to have or lack self esteem? We're going to be talking about how self acceptance and responsibility are the key elements to helping us build up our self esteem. We'll be discussing how recognizing our own values and living by them can really propel our confidence and happiness. So, tune in next week for a talk about self esteem. For now, take care and talk to you next time.